I believe that art is story and story is art. In this presentation, I'll explain what I mean by that and show you some examples of how I've used my art to narrate different stories. This is a series of drawings that I did for Jamie Smith's cartoon class, which was one of the first art classes I took at UAF. And the way to rate these is from top to bottom and left to right. But Jamie challenged us when we were coming up with ideas. He challenged us with this question to ask, what if? So here I'm asking the question, what if a lizard fell in love with a petroglyph? So in the first panel on the left, we see a lizard exploring and admiring the view from its homeland, and then it scurries off. And then in the next panel, it sees the petroglyph, and this is an actual petroglyph at Dinosaur National Monument, and it falls absolutely head over heels in love. And so it scurries back to its original place. And then in the third panel, it presents its beloved with all kinds of treats, grasshoppers, mushrooms, bugs, and a CD of rock music, because after all, the petroglyph is a rock. And the gifts bring the petroglyph to life. And you can see its tongue sticking out and it becoming alive. And then in the last panel, in the bottom on the right, the petroglyph runs off with its new love. Here the question was, what if what if a goat kid was acted like a human kid and would climb up on things and ride into a wagon like this? I used to raise dairy goats, and goats and goat kids are just so much fun. Kids just want to have fun. This was in response to a prompt from Inktober of Blade, and I was musing about, well, what if a doll sheep wore roller skates, roller blades? But of course, skating on rocks is more dangerous. We've got a fox at our house who sits outside of our window and teases the dog, and the dog barks and barks and barks, and the fox just blinks at her. It's quite a fun relationship that the two of them have. The fox occasionally leaves treats for our dog, like poops right in front of our door to send a message to our dog. I did a series of mini comics and comic strips for Jamie's class, and after Jamie's class, I've continued to do it. This one, I was wondering, what if a banjo sees its therapist, and the banjo says, "I'm depressed, anxious, I have low self-esteem. People mock me all the time, compare me to chainsaws, manure, garbage, even bagpipes, and death threats. Run over, thrown out of planes, flushed down toilets." And the therapist looks so concerned and ah, sobs the poor banjo. And then the therapist says, did you hear the one about the banjo and the zombie? The poor banjo sighs, no. Then while home from college, here's another mini comics. While home from college, Ellen gets busted by her right-wing parents. So Ellen is on the computer, and Mom says, "Ellen, dinner's ready." What are you looking at?" "Oh, Ellen, no." And Mom calls her husband, Frank, who is watching Fox News. "There will be no critical thinking in this house." critical race theory was what Ellen was looking at. I had lots of entertaining stories to tell about the pandemic. During the pandemic, I was really intrigued by all of the disinformation that was spread about COVID and especially about the vaccinations. Here, death counters disinformation during the pandemic. You can see in the top left, there's a demonstrators protesting against the vaccinations and protesting against the lockdowns. And you can see in the very back, there's this mysterious black character on the sidewalk behind the protesters. And in the second panel, you can see that mysterious character up also on the sidewalk behind protesters. And in the third panel, you can see the mysterious character. And in the fourth panel, you see that mysterious character, this time in front of a church, behind the protesters. And then we see Death's clipboard, where the next person to succumb to COVID is listed, and Death approaches one of the protesters who had a sign saying COVID is a hoax, and the young man says, "So, COVID is not a hoax?" And Death says, "You guessed it, buddy." In this one, death workers ponder the ethics of their job during the pandemic. So two death workers sitting outside on their break. "Do you ever think about the ethics of this job?" And death worker number 2 says, "What do you mean?" And the first one says, "Well, I have no problem taking old people, sick people, smokers, those kind of cases. But a teen who was called because their parents are anti-vax COVIDians, well, it just doesn't feel right." And the second death worker says, "Damn, I never thought about it like that before." And then he grows pensive, checks his cell phone, puts his cell phone back. And the first death worker says, "Well, my break's over, see ya." And the second one says, "Yeah, see ya," and looks down at the cell phone again in a big sigh because there's the death worker's daughter. Here, Death poses as a marketing executive during the pandemic. So at a seminar for anti-vax social media campaign that starts at 3 o'clock, you can tell that Death is who he is because he's got skeleton feet and skeleton hands. Welcome, everyone. Let's talk about how we can use social media to discourage people from getting their COVID vaccines. Because, as you all know, those of us in the alt health business can't make any money if people get free shots. Ideas, Mr. Doe? And Mr. Doe, in his mask, says, "We can sow fear on the vaccines on Facebook, make folks suspicious of public health workers. Disinformation will also help red state politicians breed distrust of the federal government. The vax inserts a microchip, makes you magnetic, causes infertility, miscarriages, killed thousands," those kind of posts. Death is a clever one. And after this symposium, Mr. Doe is a fishy character, and she says, "Yes, but I like his ideas." We had a most amazing cat, Sunny, who lived to be 21 years old, who was quite amazing. And we wondered, what if a cat played the piano while its humans were gone? So here the neighborhood dogs and cats are coming to Sunny's house, and Sunny gives a concert and gets really into playing his little furry feet pounding on the keyboard, and the dogs and cats go wild. "Ah, ooh, ow, meow." And they leave, and Sunny then takes a nap. Sunny also, we thought, might have been able to write a novel? So what if a cat wrote a novel? Sonny writes his first novel. Like all writers, Sonny cursed the blank page. Then inspiration came. The words flowed and flowed. Writing was like a fever. He wrote late into the night. Finally, it was finished, and Sonny did what all good cats do. After exerting themselves and writing a novel, he took a nap. This is a true story of a meeting in the College of Liberal Arts about the deletion of the Department of Sociology. I'll call this Manterruption 2.0. So the character says, I have an idea. I suggest we look at, and then the dean says, I'm against your idea. And one of my colleagues then said, me too. And the dean said, it's a very, very bad idea. And I said, or the female character here says, but we have not discussed my idea. And then the dean says, this is literally what the dean said, the idea is off the table, period. And so the Department of Sociology was deleted and all of its faculty terminated. My friend Andrea Taylor died of colon cancer, and near the end of her life, she invited me to do a series of deathbed portraits. This was my first time that I visited her while she was sick to draw her picture, and I got the impression that the disease was sweeping her away from us, that if she was caught in this river and no one could prevent her from being swept away. The owls have long been in myth as harbingers of death, and as Andrea continued to decline, you can see how thin she is in this particular photograph, this picture, this drawing, how thin she had grown. Her middle name was Raven, and she, as death approached, she began to lobby for physician-assisted suicide and to be able to be freed from her pain and her suffering. And she wanted the ravens to take her with her. She tried medically induced suicide with drugs given to her by hospice workers, but the cancer had progressed so far that her body was unable to process them, and she was unable to die. That was a long day. I was there for that full day, along with about 15 other people who were there to say goodbye and to celebrate her life and to witness her passing, but she was tethered to this earthly realm. But finally, 2 weeks after that, the drugs, a new set of drugs worked. And that night was the most amazing aurora borealis show that we've ever seen. It was just astonishing. And indigenous people have long believed that the aurora borealis represents the cook fires of the ancestors. So we all thought that the ancestors had come for Andrea, who was part Alaska Native. Andrea loved purple best, and so in this final deathbed portrait, I imagine her surrounded by purple flowers, daisies and pansies, violets, everything purple. My godchild drowned in a river behind her house many years ago, almost 40 years ago now. I've tried several times to write about that situation. Um, had plans to write a graphic novel about Abigail's death and the forces that caused it. Um, but it's so traumatic for me that I uh, have made several different starts and haven't really been able to get further than just a few panels into a graphic novel. Here's another attempt where I worked the text into the art itself. And so this is what I mean by art is story and story is art, where the text and the art are inseparable. They're like mirrors for each other. So this is from an original song that I wrote, and the chorus goes, grief and trouble loom, shadows in the water shiver, old folks say there'll be sorrow soon when catfish cry in the river. This is from another song that I wrote. She's looking out the door. This small town life we love so she doesn't want anymore. You can see it in her eyes. By wintertime she'll be gone. That woman's got her walking shoes on. I performed that song live on the stage in Juneau for the Alaska Folk Festival a few years ago. It was a fun time. So last year I had cancer. I've had COVID 3 times and now have long haul COVID, post COVID syndrome, and chronicling that in this drawing, this self portrait. Here's a portrait of the artist envisioning a future for myself, finding finding reasons to go on. And here's a reason to go on, and that is art. So I started this presentation with a color drawing, and I'm going to end here with this color drawing that uh, inspires me, and I find just so much joy and relief when doing art and writing stories through art.